I suppose we go back to what you said earlier on, or what we were both talking about earlier on, is play what's right, play what's needed.
Yeah. Does that extend to the solo as well, do you think?
No, I think I'm fuging out on that. And that's actually quite classically inflected. At that tempo in a ballad, you can do that kind of thing. It's rather florid.
It's a quite, I love the solo very much. Who would you say, this is a horrible question. I hope you don't mind my asking. Who were your influences when you were soloing? I do really want to know who you like.
Oh, okay. I like everyone. I'm sorry, that is not a helpful answer, but
go on, get out of
here. All right. No, I mean, okay, I'll answer your question in a roundabout way. There is a popular radio program been running for like almost 100 years in this country called Desert Island Discs. And the premise is they use it as a jumping off point. They get a celebrity or somebody of note in, and they choose 6 recordings that they, if they were shipwrecked, they'd want them. And they use those as springboards to say what they were thinking about, what they were feeling, how they mean, whatever. I'd be a lousy guest on that for 2 reasons. First of all, because 6, forget it. Maybe 600. And secondly, because as musicians, and I'm sure you feel the same way, if I was shipwrecked, I wouldn't need any discs or recordings. I've got only an iPod. You know what I mean? You can play music in your own head.
Yeah, that's right.
And actually, I mean, that's where a lot of these things like, relative pitch and things come from. And people say, oh, yeah, well, I know where an A is from, or I know what an E flat is. I know where an E flat is because I know, where it is. I know it's the starting version of the Miles and the Bill Evans version. Mm-hmm. It's not like a perfect pitch thing. I don't feel that it's an E flat. I don't feel that it's any different from a D. It's ingrained in me that I know what it is. And I think that's to do with the inner iPod thing. I've lost track. Can you bring me back, please?
Well, you were talking about, I was asking you for influences and you dodged.
Influences. Yeah. Okay. Well, my influences, I did sort of answer it when I said, who are your 6 favorite? Well, maybe 600. But that's not very helpful, is it?
Well, perhaps we should narrow it down to when you were younger and you hadn't listened to so much music. Maybe there was a few people who you gravitated towards, who pulled you into this.
I'll tell you what, there were people that were very prominent and I liked. And then there were people that I gravitated towards, and then there was everyone. The people that were prominent, unfortunately at the time, the pianist that was most prominent or available to me was Oscar Peterson, who is absolutely fantastic. But if you're sort of 10 years old and you're thinking, I want to be a jazz player, and you put that on, you're going to give up and go and get a job in a bank. I mean, come on. And then perhaps if you're lucky or experienced, or somebody else gives you a steer, you say, oh, no, you don't actually have to play like that to be a jazz pianist. So, I learned a lot from my earlier thing. Yeah, I went to school completely on the Miles Ing albums, as I call them. Hard bop stuff, changes are very clear. You just play along with the recordings. So Red Garland, people like that. Really, I've always had an incredibly soft spot for Tommy Flanagan. And then, of course, from there you progress into, Herbie and Chick and Tyner and people like that. And then into what I call the sort of New Yorkie sound, it's pretty much Tyner derived, I think, ultimately. It's a sort of colorazzo-y thing, which is very pentatonic. overlaid, well, partially Tynerish and partially careerish.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was kind of the progression for me. But I mean, I've also been influenced by local people you've never heard of.
Of course. Given our discussion of not playing as much as playing, you didn't mention Ahmad Jamal, who's perhaps the paragon of that particular thought process. Did you find him appealing?
Absolutely. I used to do an almost note for note version, one of my set lists of his Poinciana.
Yeah.
And that's just all about balance and the beautiful voicings. Of course, Bill Evans. I mean, who can leave out Bill Evans?
Right.
Basically, if saying you're a jazz pianist without mentioning Bill Evans is like saying you're a physicist without mentioning Einstein. It's crazy, you know.
Well, since you've brought these people up, there are, I guess, when I find Bill Evans and Oscar Peterson both to be problematic. I love them and have listened to lots and lots of them, but they also give me pause. Do they give you pause?
Depends. I think Bill Evans, there are different Bill Evanses.
Yeah.
When he was first on the Miles, when he first came out, when he was first doing his thing, he was actually far more bebop than most people appreciate. Then, you know, I mean, he was, you know, being the studied classical kind of guy, very much the obvious choice in my, you know, I think for Miles to explore things like, you know, he did on Kind of Blue. Thereafter, I think, you know, he kind of blended the two together, and those trios he had with, you know, I mean, Scott LaFaro and then the later version with, Scott LaFaro, Larry Bunker, and then the later version with Eddie Gomez and, well, Joe LaBarbera and lots of other people.
Yeah.
I think at that stage, he got a bit over the top for my personal tastes. Okay, yeah, we know you can play, you can voice this exquisite moving chorale style stuff, 8 voicings, but it sort of felt like the pudding was too rich for me, and listening to some of those later, like the 70s and 80s recordings, to me. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I absolutely appreciate and respect what he did. So, I mean, for when I'm talking about Bill Evans, the stuff that I really like, yeah, his earlier stuff, the way he worked with Miles, definitely. Although he was actually really rather out of his depth with Miles on a couple of occasions, particularly when they went swinging. There's a wonderful recording. I think the recording, I think, it's you'll probably find it under the name Miles 58. They'd actually done like 3 or 4 moody ballads, a whole sextet, I think it was. And I think that as the tale goes, Miles felt everyone was getting a bit antsy and they wanted to kind of kick loose a bit. So I just counted off Love for Sale, and they were just 1, 2, and they hit that. And that sextet version, with, you know, particularly the way Bill Evans plays on that. I'll send you a transcription because I have that in my fingers, if you're interested. That that solo he takes on that Love for Sale, among others, you know, is just. But it's not what you might think as this kind of. I think Bill Evans is misunderstood in a way, possibly through jazz education, because people think, oh yeah, these are Bill Evans left-hand voicings, the rootless jobs, you know, the ones I mean. Yeah, that's Bill Evans voicings, and you play something on top. That isn't actually the way he ever played. It was one of the techniques he used. And yeah, he thought that way, and he did use them sometimes. So I don't know. I mean, horses for courses, and your tastes are yours. But yeah, for me, Bill Evans was one of the best. Although, as I say, I think he got a bit. Okay, let's not cut corners. By the time we'd reached the 80s, he'd gone cokey.
Right. Well, you can't dispute the effect of the drugs, of course. I want to ask about Peterson. Then let's talk a little bit about Peterson. Again, a musician who I adore and who I've studied and listened to a lot, and yet it's hard. I find myself wrestling with him a lot in my head, in a way that I don't wrestle with other jazz musicians, and not just because of his phenomenal ability. There's something else that's bugging me, and I wonder if it bugs you.
Well, I don't know if you tell me what's bugging you, then maybe I could ask. I don't.
So nothing bugs you about Oscar Peterson?
No. What's bugging you?
Okay, I have to tell you first. All right.
Please. No. I mean, if you're asking me a question, I need something to respond to.
Well, I guess I was asking you, first of all, if anything bugs you about Oscar Peterson before I tell you.
Oh, there are things, but tell me where you're at first.
Sure, I'll be glad to. This is all, for any Oscar Peterson devotee, this is all with the utmost respect to a man who I have listened to exhaustively and love and would love to play like. However,
amen. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. However, for me, I swear I've been thinking about this on and off for 30 years. The thing I most recently came to the conclusion of was that I never feel like he's learning anything while he's playing. I feel like he wants to have it all figured out before he gets it to you. And, he can do anything except, figure it out on the spot. I'm sure he could, but he won't. So there's a sort of refusal to bear that last bit of himself for you, which I'd much rather listen to Bud Powell than Oscar Peterson, because Bud Powell's the opposite. He doesn't, whether or not he meant to, he absolutely bears it all for you. And however,
what you're saying is Bud Powell would reach and sometimes fall.
Yeah. And Oscar Peterson made himself so good that he never had to reach. And I find that a terrible shame, at least of the recordings that I've heard of him.
No, I do see what you mean. There is this sort of glossy perfectionism. But I wonder whether the attitude I quite agree with. I mean, there is this notion, this separation in jazz listeners or jazz aficionados or jazz enthusiasts' ears, that it's not the same if you've got it down pat. They have to be in the moment. The answer is always both, in my experience. I mean, I've never met any jazz musician who didn't work a few little ideas out in advance. And yeah, okay, you'd improvise between them. Now, I suppose the issue is the extent to which you take that. And one of the criticisms of Oscar OP was that it was sort of musical Lego, constantly recycled. Well, who's not to like Lego? I don't know,
Right. Well, I don't know. I think that's a bit unfair, because the invention is Mozartian. It's really, if you take his solos apart, they're just full of, it may be Legos, but they're tiny Legos. It's musical.
Well, any very detailed music is like that. When it's fractal, you get into it, you see, oh, it's that underneath that. And then I wonder what's inside that bit. And then, oh, there's something else inside that. So I don't know. And I am loath to criticize the man. It's a sad story, actually. I've seen him twice in my life. Once when he was full of vim and vigor. And then again, after he'd had his stroke, it was at the Albert Hall where he was doing his walk around tour. Bless him, he had to reteach himself to play, and it was great. It was really a kind of thank you, hello, thank you, everybody, and sayonara and all that kind of tour.
Right.
And he had a guitarist with him who played most of the solos. But I do recall that, I think he was slightly brain, he had some issues then, because on that occasion, I don't think it was deliberate, but he called Satindol twice in the same set. It was a bit sad to see. It was a bit sad to see. Anyway, that's just by way of background. Yeah, I don't know. This notion of this fluidity. I don't know. Maybe it's a sense of a kind of lack of technical vulnerability that's part of it.
In terms of the preparation bit, now Nat Cole, he planned all his solos out to the note. He didn't improvise, from what I understand, at all. He planned, and yet when he plays, there is no sense of that. It doesn't feel planned, which is quite the opposite. I think Oscar Peterson was improvising, but it doesn't necessarily feel improvised. The Stratford Shakespeare recordings, those are a little different. He's younger and maybe stretching, but I think, there's something in those that I find a little different. And of course, his Tracks album, where he's playing all by himself, that is an album I can listen to again and again.
Well, I mean, that's like Tatum 2.0, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. So there is something, maybe it's the circumstances in which he was in. He was rarely in circumstances where he felt he could stretch. Maybe he was just playing just way too fast for anyone else to keep up with him, and there was just no way, and he was just going to have to slow himself down for whoever he was with. And in these other situations, he really was with folks who could keep up with him. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying I've got anything like his chops, but I think you'd probably be in this situation. I'm not bigging myself up or you up by this, where, you're capable of thinking at, 40 miles an hour, and you're playing with a band that can only go 20. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you've been in that situation. What did you do? You didn't want it to just be stale.
I don't think it has to be stale at 20.
Right.
I don't really know the answer. Yeah, Oscar is a bit of a complication in a way, because he's an amalgam of certainly the Tatum tradition, some of the power. He also was immensely technically trained. I mean, by some of the best in the business. He had classical technique to die for. Although I don't recall him ever actually playing classical repertoire, but
no, perhaps the technique is part of the picture too. There's a refined.
Are you saying that perfect technique doesn't feel authentic? I don't know.
I don't know. I hadn't thought of it.
Well, I don't know. I don't know the answer either. I think it's massively enjoyable. I think to go back to what I said, though, I think what it can do to a young pianist is they think that is what jazz piano is.
Yes.
And if they can't get, if that's what they think it is, it's going to totally put them off, because there's no way they can ever get near it.
Right. Or if they do, it's just going to end up sounding like warmed over Oscar Peterson anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. And but at the same time, I don't think Peterson sounds like warmed over Tatum either.
No. I don't think that at all. They're very different pianists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it's been interesting discussion, but I don't know. Yeah, I have felt. Peterson to me is someone to greatly admire, and my God, you can't help but enjoy it. And there is, I do think, something that is possibly even too polished. I agree with you, in my opinion. I mean, I'm sure. Okay, so you and I, when the pitchforks are out, you and I, you and I can retreat to the castle.
I'm certainly not going to be any threat to Peterson, so there's no reason anyone needs to.
Oh no, I'm talking about the outrage about us daring to bloody say such things about him.
Geez, I just found out that Miles Davis hated Oscar Peterson. I had no idea. Did you know that?
I didn't. Where'd you get that?
Apparently, he loathed him. I think he even said something like, "Man, that guy even had to learn to play the blues." Apparently, Davis did not like Peterson.
I think, man, yeah, I think not having to learn the blues is actually something. Yeah, I think that is, Peterson is, as I said, he comes from a very classical, trained, studied, technical side of things.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like saying, you take a classical pianist, really good classical pianist, and say, swing it. And they can't.
Right.
Or they will just try and it doesn't work. So maybe that was what Miles' thing was about. I don't know. I don't know. But no, I don't think what Peterson did was simpatico with what Miles was trying to do or interested in doing. So that might have been part of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there's a lot of pianists who fit that description who weren't doing what Miles was doing. Perhaps Miles was jealous of Peterson's financial success because he was a very successful pianist.
That's true enough, yeah. But Miles did actually embrace an awful lot of different types of pianists. He used Ahmad. He used Ahmad. He used Horace Silver. He used Bill Evans, Win Kelly.
He used Ahmad.
Yeah, on some.
I'm not aware of that.
I
have to look for that.
And all the way, and all the way through until he, right the way through till the day I was, hey, yeah, bring these guys on.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it might have been also that Miles was a bit of a rebel in terms of, one, a little bit of Juilliard and hey, the hell with this,
right?
And perhaps he resented the notion of somebody who was really very studied in terms of technique. I don't know.
That brings us almost full circle back to where we started.
And
so let's wrap up with a question. Given your experience, in so many different areas of music, what would you tell an aspiring musician to prioritize?
Gig. Get out there. Just gig. Just go out and play for people. You'll feel horrible the first time. You'll get it wrong. You'll have good ones, bad ones, indifferent ones. You'll have good ones that, you think they're great and nobody cares. You'll have bad ones that everyone's dancing on the tables at. You'll have indifferent ones that just pay the rent. You'll feel you get stuck. You'll play with different people. You won't get on with them musically or even personally, but you figure it out. You go, just gig.
That's marvelous. Jason Lyon, it's a privilege having known you these many years, and I'm so glad we got a chance to talk here on the show. Thank you for taking the time, and thanks for talking with us.
My pleasure, Adam. Take care.
Thank you also, folks, for tuning in to our show. We really, really appreciate you watching and listening and hanging out with us. Please like our videos if you like them, and please subscribe and tell your friends. We look forward to seeing you again at our next interview, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.